Can't help it. I want perfection, and I don't always get it. And half the time, I don't know what's going on anyway. But we're going to try and see if we're live. And sounds like somebody's at the door. I don't know. It looks like we're live. I was fighting with you, door. Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm John Miglosh for the Wisconsin DMA and the International Society for Strategic Marketing. Okay, and I see myself over there. Oops, the style consultant isn't here yet. So we got to do our own hair. And you can see the magic hands of the hair consultant coming in. Okay, we look decent. And we're going to start with something in honor of the LA Rams torching the St. Louis Cardinals. And of course, you know, if you're a serious sports fan, you know that you always evaluate which mascot will be more powerful. So obviously, a Ram is going to squash a Cardinal. So you should have known that was coming. Anyway, this is not sports betting advice. Let's get over and see this. This is a really well done commercial, but it's long, and it's about Robert Woods, who's a receiver for the Los Angeles Rams. So I thought it'd be good for today. But it's mostly about how his sister, who was diagnosed with cancer when she was 12, and survived 5 years after doctors said she had just months to live. But her fight inspired him, and her last words were, "Be a model."
Those who help guide your journey and propel you forward. And no one more than your big sister, Olivia. She was there from the beginning, pushing, supporting, and driving you. She saw something in you, something you may not have even seen in yourself. She paved the way as you grew, and your path became even more clear. You played every down for her, even when she couldn't be there. While you battled in pursuit of your dreams, she battled for her life. Her last words to you were to be a model. To accept the responsibility of representing yourself, your family, and your city.
Touchdown, Robert Woods.
So every time you face adversity, she is there with you, by your side, as she has been since the beginning. Because you play for something bigger than yourself. For those who have been a part of your journey, for your family, and for Olivia. She'd be quite proud of the man her little brother has become. A role model of greatness.
Okay, that was good. That was good. Now it's going to cancel. It's going to autoplay, which drives me nuts. Anyway, so let's get over to the real news. But keep that in mind. And sports is an interesting metaphor. You know, you probably have memories. None of us went as far as Robert Woods, of course, in our sports career. But, you know, I remember shoving a ball up toward the basket and having it dribble in. You know, one of the few baskets I ever got to make in high school. I remember crossing some finish lines in some downhill skiing and in some racing and some stuff. Sports shapes us, and it's good to see Gatorade finding a good model as a model. I really appreciate that, because there's so many great stories in sports that can inspire us. So now let's get over to the rest of the news. I have to figure out where I'm at here. Here I am. Let's go over here. PDF. Okay, how Facebook and Google rigged ad markets. The best part is both CEOs of Google and Facebook, there's absolute proof, unredacted evidence reveals that Facebook and Google CEOs knew about the Jedi Blue ad rigging scheme. My word, as if they didn't have enough money. The internet giants, officially called Alphabet and Meta, received 52% of digital ad spend, okay, last year. And if that isn't enough, court documents from a recent lawsuit show that the firms rigged ad markets. Facebook wanted to start doing something with banner ads that would have impacted Google ad network. Google decided instead of letting them create a competing place, Google would create a Google managed system to bid on and manage ads, which would give preferential rates on ads. It's basically where Google can put their finger on the scale. It's an idiom that you'd use for talking about your butcher. So you buy a pound of meat, and the butcher puts the meat up on the scale and leaves his finger on it just a little bit, pushed down a little bit. So instead of getting a pound of meat, you get 14 ounces and a finger, but you don't get to keep the finger. And so that and they also controlled who had the first dibs on prime ad placement. And is it the end of the world? No, but it just shows you that they're not ethical, much less legal. They're the cheating butchers. And as if there weren't enough ad fraud. We all know about the bots, that most of the traffic on the internet is bots, and that most of the bots are run by AI. And so the AI are telling your Google ad network attribution which ads they like and which they click on. And you're telling your CFO how effective your advertising is because Google tolerates the bots, Facebook tolerates the bots, and the whole thing is a big shill game. Anyway, they're getting caught. States are suing Google for a number of ad rigging schemes. Isn't the only one. And if regulators win one or more cases, maybe they'll be in for some trouble. I doubt it, but that's the way it is. Okay. So I wanted to take most of the time for 6 common and costly direct mail mistakes from Patrick Carroll up at Sequel up in Minneapolis, where Eric Koenig is up there running stuff, I think. Anyway, and so his premise is an excellent one. People are wanting to launch into the direct mail channel, and that involves a significant investment. Okay, you can't just take your digital ads and put them on a postcard. I mean, you can, sure you can, of course you can. And that's one of the points that you got to read this article take it with a grain of salt. It talks about errors, and it's really about, can you overcome these errors? Sure. I was at Namoa years ago. Now it's about 5 or 6 years ago, when Wayfair got up and talked about, for an hour or more, talked about their launch of a catalog and how they didn't know that they should be buying paper. They weren't prepared for that. They weren't prepared for the complexity of an organized vehicle. A catalog is an organized vehicle. You could think of it as 1,000 ads, but it's not the same as doing 1,000 ads. Because you can do 1,000 ads, 1 a day, for a while, or 5 a day, or 20 a day, and get it done. And there's not necessarily a relationship between, you can use a template or whatever, but you can just put out the ads. A catalog doesn't work that way. You make this one a little bigger, and this one's got to be a little smaller. It's got to. And, you write a little too much copy in one, you got to have a little less in another, or you got to cut the copy, or you got to do something, And so it's a puzzle, and it has to all fit together at the end. And if you're not used to doing that, it is puzzling. And I remember sitting at the table, listening to the speaker, and I said to some, sort of loud enough for the table to hear, if they would have called any one of us at the table, we could have prevented all this. And that was true. It really was true. But they bumbled through, and they got it going, and they printed a lot of catalogs, and I think it did pretty well, actually. I don't know what the state of it is now. I don't buy from them, but you can just give it a go and see what happens. So brands have their eyes on mail. Here's some of the costly direct mail mistakes. The first one is mailing with a single list source. Okay, and what that means is that you say to somebody, you say to me, you call me up and say, somebody called the other day and said, I'd like to reach, in this case it was a list source. I'd like to reach 20 zip codes. I'd like emails to email to 20 zip codes. Can I find that? Oh, sure, I can find that. Okay, so I call somebody. It's the problem is, and it wasn't even it was new movers. And the trouble is that that's not a very big number. It's going to be a couple of thousand, and most lists have a minimum of like 5,000. So if you're going to do a very, very small mailing, one list source is all you're going to get. Now you can still subdivide within that, but it's not going to be statistically significant. So one of the things that makes mail work as far as a testing arena is if you have enough to be statistically valid. If you don't, it's not going to make any sense whatever you get, because it's going to change, and one or two orders can throw the thing all in a kilter. So, but the first thing you do is decide to mail at least the number of list sources is, let's say, a minimum of 5,000 in each list source. So if you want to test 4 lists, you're going to have to mail 20,000 names. That's a good way to think of it. I mean, it's not. Is it absolutely for certain that way? No. But like a lot of things in this article, I'm sure that Patrick and I would agree on it if we talked about it over a beer. But I'm going to just give you a little different perspective on some of this stuff. So if you tested 4 data providers, the chances of one of those lists performing 25% better or worse than average is practically a guarantee. Absolutely. Is one going to be great and 3 are going to be kind of crappy? Now the trouble is, if you repeat the same test with the same list sources, you might get a different one. That's the tricky part, and that's why a significant number and also some rationale behind the list choice is often good. So anyway, Patrick says that the list sources are sophisticated data science and data skilled scientists and stuff, but if you don't have enough data, it doesn't matter what they do. And just because you have all that sophistication doesn't mean really all that much. I remember Miles Kimball talking about a data provider that I think they said started with a G and will not be named. And this G data source said, well, just send us your customers and we'll decide what they're like. But the problem is that they're looking at it with geodemographics or third-party click data or who knows what validity, whereas Miles Kimball was looking at, and it's called Silver Star now, but everybody thinks of it as Miles Kimball. Everybody, but they know their customers. They know what they're like. They know what they buy. They know what they buy on a repeated basis. So they said, would you like to know what we think our customers are like? No. We're going to do it all with sophisticated data science and skilled data scientists. Okay. It's like, just because you have a powerful tool, just because you have a microscope doesn't mean you should use it to drive your car, look through it to drive your car. It's just not always appropriate. And so almost all of this stuff is taken with a grain of salt. Predictive modeling is best at ruling out who isn't likely to buy. It's not that good at picking who's going to buy. Just saying. Okay. So merge purge, that's another interesting kettle of fish. Okay, so if you had 4 data sources, if somebody was on all 4 lists and you didn't do a merge, they'd get 4 catalogs. It's not the end of the world, And one of the things we found out over the years is the more times you mail somebody, the more chance they have to pass it along to a friend if they like it. So no matter what anybody thinks about merge purge, the biggest reason to do it is to avoid customer complaints about getting 4 pieces of mail on the same day. Otherwise, it doesn't really improve response. It isn't an error per se. And what I typically do instead of purging those duplicate records, if I have a name that's on 4 list sources, I'll mail them again. I'll mail them once with everybody else. Then I'll mail them again in 2 weeks, and then I'll mail them again in 2 weeks, and then again in 2 weeks. And I keep a rolling multis mailing, and they do really well. So uh, the biggest thing is probably is address correction, trying to get an address that the postal service will actually deliver. That's important, but you can do that really fast. Um, all that address hygiene, you can upload your list, and in literally seconds you can get it back, and it costs you a couple of bucks. And Scott Eganhouse is going to be on our meetup down there, WDMA. Now I put up a place where you can at least register. It's going to be a week from today at 2 p.m. And Scott's going to give us a little presentation about data hygiene and stuff, so he can speak to this. We'll ask him hard questions. Okay, another big problem is unfamiliarity with print manufacturing. And I've seen more problems with this. Excuse me, I still have a little touch of a cough. With direct mail agencies, where they didn't know about the printing requirements. I've seen that probably more than with especially with experienced users who tend to keep the formats the same. But I've made these mistakes, so it's really good to get with your printer as early as possible to make mock-ups and to have a good idea of what's getting produced. It's also good to talk to more than one printer, because sometimes a 1/16 of an inch trim size difference, talk to your own printer, can save you a lot of money in which press it can run on. What you want is you want to run it a long time on a smaller press as it'll fit, rather than, because you have a lot more waste on a big press. There's a lot more setup and that sort of thing. So anyway, there are countless nuances when it comes to designing for print manufacturing and meeting postal regulations, right? So get with your printers. Also, not understanding statistical significance, right? I think I told you earlier in the week, we did some prospect modeling for In-Fisherman years ago, and we found that our best zip code, that's oftentimes how you do prospect modeling, but we were doing 500,000 per model. I mean, it was not an insignificant number. But what you find is that out of 50,000 zip codes, only about 20,000, even mailing 500,000, only about 20,000 get any mail at all, and most of them get one piece. And if somebody orders, it's 100% response. And if in one case we had a zip code in Arizona where 2 people ordered and only one person got mailed, I mean, there was 2 orders from the same person, and so that was our definitive predictive modeling poster child zip code. But the problem is that that's just a fluke. It's not significant. And so instead, what we started doing was keeping track of how many we mailed into a zip code that didn't respond, and use it to rule out zip codes that were highly unlikely to respond. So statistical significance is somewhat of an art in itself. The whole science of statistics is based on significance, and it's a little different in the kind of modeling we do. I mean, we have I remember Connie Bauer, who taught me most of what I started with in modeling, said you can make a valid model with 50 customers as long as they're the right customers. Yeah, as long as they're a representative sample. But she spent a lot of time figuring out what a representative sample was, and this was in the day when we were throwing around millions and millions, or even hundreds of millions of transactions for Hudson Bay. And I said, well, does it hurt if we use 100,000 in a model? Well, she had never had computers that could do it. And so we started from the get-go that way. But nowadays, with all of the one-to-one marketing talk for decades now, everybody wants to mail 3 pieces of mail that are going to get 100% response. It doesn't work that way. So testing, though, is the best practice. And Patrick, you and I are definitely on the same page with that. Conducting and this, I wasn't exactly sure. It would have been nice to have a few examples, but oftentimes what you think is working in a test isn't exactly what happened. I'm trying to think of a good example, but I can't think of one. And so, Patrick, we'll have to put our heads together on this, where we thought that a creative test indicated A and it really indicated B. But that's why we retest. Well, the first rule of direct mail that I learned way back in 1981 was always test something. That's from Big Hunter. And so always test something, and when you think you've got it down, you might want to retest it. Okay. Here's one that I might take a little issue of: relying on one print partner. Well, you got run links. You want to rely mostly on one print partner, but what you want is you want a relationship with a really good printer. So like Amadon Graphics, Mary England up there was telling me a story that, she was turning away business, but, trying to find good printers for her customers to go to because she couldn't get mail. She'll probably be on the meetup next week because she comes to these regularly. And maybe we'll ask her about, is it better to have one really good print partner that can tell you when you can save a lot by adding or subtracting a 1/16 of an inch trim size? Or is it better to have multiple print partners and try and play them off against each other? I know the answer to that. The answer is always best to be loyal as much as possible and to keep your printer in the loop. And you might want to add coordination with digital partners. Somehow this reduces overall CPAs. I'm not sure what certified public accountants have to do with this, and I'm not sure what a CPA, I can think of 3 or 4 things a CPA could be, but not any in this sentence. So Patrick, you're going to have to get back to me on what is a CPA at the end of the article. Anyway, the ultimate mistake is abandoning customer acquisition due to innocent isn't the right word, negligent campaign errors. But oftentimes that's because of attribution. If your mail is designed to drive traffic to the web and you let the web guys do all the attribution, they will take all the credit. So make sure that you do some holdout testing. And if you don't know what that is, follow along. Anyway, you don't mail everybody. You mail some people and you don't mail others. This is especially effective with customer files because then you can downstream look at how much they spent. Again, you need tens of thousands of names in the panels to make it work out, but we always see about 300% ROI, EBITDA, about 900% return on ad spend for mailed customers versus unmailed. So that's the best. So there's Patrick Carroll. Have a great day. SQL Response in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Like and share. Your friends will know you're smart. Oh, and they have a direct mail testing strategy by Eric Koenig, and I'll put that in the show notes over at wdma.org as well.